Hello, investors. This is Todd Thomas, Associate Portfolio Manager with Revere Asset Management. Today is Saturday, November 15th. The time is 9:18 a.m., coming to you from Boca Raton, Florida, to bring you the Revere Roundup weekend walkthrough. Going to the trend gauge and the state of the market, I'd say this does the market a good picture of what really is happening. Pretty much a mess, especially in the leaders, with the leaders in now that neutral sub arrow or neutral arrow with the red sub arrow. Also, the short term has been downgraded to negative, as all indexes now are below that 21-day moving average. Also, the medium term, the S&P and the NAS are still above that 50-day and held the 50-day. However, the mid, smalls, and S&P equal weight are all below that key 50-day moving average, and all indexes remain above the 200-day moving average. Overall, a volatile week on the government reopen, which ends with the indexes holding the 50-day moving average. Going through all the proxies as well as the indexes, the Big 8 was down 0.83, Revere Growth 8 Composite down 3.01. Notable in that, the IBD 50 was down almost 7%, and ARC funds were down 4.74%. Otherwise, more muted losses in that. Revere Growth 8, the S&P was up 0.08%, the equal weight down 0.12%, NASDAQ 100 down 0.14%, equal weight down worse at 0.43%. Dow, which made new all-time high during the week, closed with a small gain of 0.34%. Midcaps down 1.17%. Russell down 1.83%. 60/40 flat, up slightly, up 0.13%. GROTECTION down 0.75%. And Turbo, that was down 1.43%. What happened last week? Closing out the week, Berkshire Hathaway announced after the close that they purchased a new 17.85 million share position in Google. Google was trading about 4% higher in the aftermarket. The Bureau of Labor Statistics also announced the September job report will be released on Thursday, November 20th of this upcoming week. Google also announced plans after the close to invest $40 billion in new Texas data centers. Samsung on Friday morning announced a 30 to 60% price hikes on memory prices due to shortages and panic buying by some distributors. That basically sent Micron and SanDisk back into orbit on Friday. Bitcoin tumbles to 5-month lows and now cracks well below that 100,000 level, currently trading around 95,000 and change. AMD midweek increased their 3 to 5 year data center forecast at their analyst day to a compound annual rate of 35%, substantially hiking their growth based on strong demand indications from all their customers. On the disappointing side, CoreWeave, Nebius, and Wolf fell sharply on disappointing earnings results, sending many data center names down, including putting pressure on Amazon through Amazon Web Service. Oh, I didn't finish out the earnings winners, but there weren't that many, Cisco being the key one. Earnings losers, CoreWeave, Nebius, Wolf, Rocket Lab, ASTS, SE, Life 360, RGTI, and Disney. Wanted to bring a few charts into focus this week. Overall, S&P up 14.5% on the week, but accumulation distribution rating now a C. We can see those tests of that 50-day moving average and that advanced decline line flattening out after being relatively strong throughout the year. NASDAQ in a worse situation with the AD now a D-, and wanted to point out this declining advanced decline line, also that break of the 50, and definitely a deteriorating situation in momentum, especially in the NASDAQ. Also wanted to cover the top 25 industry groups. That telecom fiber optic led by LITE and Ciena. Data storage, that's your Micron and SanDisk. alternative energy with Bloom Energy leading that charge, but coming up through the ranks from 13 3 weeks ago to 4 is the electronic contract manufacturing, which we have some of those names in our watch list. Biotech has been creeping up from 12 to 8 to 5 this week. Mining backing off a little bit. Gold and silver coming back up a little bit. Solar coming down a little bit. Overall, going through, we see a lot of medical stocks starting to climb into the top 25. And let's see if there's anything else notable here. Oil and gas, machinery and equipment, and telecom infrastructure coming off quite a bit from 5 to 6 down to 24. And so that's the state of the top leading industry groups. Also wanted to point out something we've been talking about internally the last few weeks. This is the net new highs overall on the market. These are the net number of issues making new highs versus new lows. You can see not a desirable situation. If we go back to December and January, a lot of chop. And again, that started turning back there, and you can see just a lot of chop during that period. And then naturally going into that April decline, that just started getting much bigger. And then, of course, you want to see that starting to decline. Now we're starting to enter that phase where the last few weeks we've seen net new lows outnumber net new highs. And this is on the New York and the NASDAQ here. And the NASDAQ especially is standing out with a lot of net new lows on a day-to-day basis, including Friday. So we're going to want to see that situation improve and start turning black. And you notice as we turn black, market in a healthy uptrend. Right now, that uptrend is being challenged. Now, with the government reopening, we have economic reports that'll be coming out next week, including the September job numbers. Overall, we have industrial production and capacity utilization, mortgage numbers and the housing numbers coming out midweek, Philly Fed, as well as existing home sales and the S&P global manufacturing PMIs coming out, as well as ending the week on the University of Michigan consumer sentiment. Earnings are winding down, but still some reports coming out, notably NVDA on Wednesday after the close, Powell in the data center building area after the close on Tuesday, Home Depot on Monday morning. So handful of names, Lowe's, TJ Maxx, and retailers, Walmart coming out Thursday morning, and BJ's and so forth. So winding down with NVIDIA and some big economic numbers. So we expect to see potentially some volatility with the release of those job numbers and NVIDIA coming out with the overall weakening of the market situation. Going to the charts now on the week, looking at that S&P up with two tight weekly closes right on that 10-week moving average. Interweek, we see that attempt to get above all those key short-term moving averages on Wednesday, followed by that undercut on Friday. And looking at Friday's activity, we see that big gap down, really an air pocket held and closed, chopped in the afternoon. But overall, positive sign that we did hold that 50-day moving average overall, and we're going to want to see that make progress now. RSP, not much to say there, up below all their key moving averages, including the 50-day, as there's been a confluence there, and many closes below that over the last couple of weeks. Q's also right on that 10-week moving average, bounced off that 50 and below the 8 and the 21. Equal weight, same situation, right on that 10-week moving average, but below the 50-day moving average. So not a pretty picture there. Dow closed just below the 21-day, made new interweek all-time high. Mid-caps also below all the key moving averages, 50, 21, and 8-day moving average. And the Russell 2000 also below that 50-day moving average. So again, the small, mid, and equal weights all below the 50-day moving average now. VIX slightly elevated here, up 3.92% at 19.83, did back off from around almost 23 interweek, but volatility elevated, which is something we don't like to see. dollar index backed off a little bit after trying to get it back above that 100 level, etched out a higher high from this summer level, but then backed off pretty substantially over the last 2 weeks. Gold was up 2.08%, follow through from last week. Gold miners up almost 5% on positive earnings report out of a few gold names, which followed through. Silver also tempted to get back at those all-time highs from last week, but still closed up almost 5%. And Bitcoin with a disastrous drop again and hold below that 200-day moving average and below the key $100,000 level and around 95,000 on the week. Bonds were down as yields climbed this week, going to the 30-year yield. We're at up 4.5 basis points at 4.74. The 10-year climbing at 4.148. Recall that a few weeks back we did break below that 4% level, but on the Federal Reserve statement that a December cut was not on the table. Yields have been climbing, and also the odds of a December cut have dropped below 50% on the odds markets. In the Mag 7, down 1.16%. So let's get into our watch list. Watch list has gotten smaller, but there still are several names and sorted by the top industry groups this week. SanDisk, new all-time highs up 6.13%. Had a pretty big drop on Thursday, but then that Samsung news sent it back up on Friday, but Friday definitely closed toward the low end of the day. So again, not the strongest action on Friday. Celestica held that 10-week moving average after a few tests here along the way. Again, Celestica has been a bellwether, and this is really the first trip to the 50-day moving average in this entire run. It's had tests, almost tested that 10-week, but never an actual test of that 50-day, but had a very strong bounce off that 50-day moving average. Seagate, down 7.57%, extremely extended. Light, down 3.32%. Broke that 8 EMA on Thursday, closed just below it on Friday on a nice rebound, up 2.3%. Again, this is in that fiber optic area, which is the number one industry group, but it is quite extended. And you can see these have definitely accelerated above these upper trend lines and back through. So Bloom Energy bounced off the 10-week moving average and the 50-day moving average after a trip down to that. This is also that their first trip to the 50-day and the 10-week moving average, but extremely extended, but definitely a leading stock in a leading group, the alternative energy group. Next tracker also with a test of that 10-week moving average as some of the solar stocks were challenged. Micron Technology, another up week, up 3.74%. Definitely aided by that Samsung news. But really, this stock has been in a very nice accelerated uptrend channel. Popped above that upper end just a little bit, but this has been a very strong stock. And with 105% growth this year, 18% for fiscal 27. Very strong earnings and sales growth, triple digits, running right through May of 26. Ciena also in stock that's been extremely strong, down 3.7%. And this is very much like Micron, really the first trip to that 21-day moving average and shook out below that and closed above it, but very strong upward trend. Alternative energy stock, or actually AEIS in the power conversion area, down 6%. First Solar down 5%. Coherent down 9% after last week's earnings. Gap right on that 21-day moving average. Fabrinet in the electronic contract manufacturing, which moved up to the number 6 group, bounced off that 10-week moving average following earnings the week before last, but down 8% on the week. Insight down 1.7%. This is a leading biotech name. Western Digital, extremely extended, down 3%. Not down much on the week, below that 8-day moving average, but above the 21-day. Guardian Health just consolidating after that earnings gap, up down 2.4%. TEL in the fiber optic connection area down 2%, hanging in there. TTMI, this is a contract manufacturing stock, up 1.9%. Also had a strong earnings gap move and shake out below the 21, but a strong close on Friday. Fluence Energy in the battery storage space down 13%. Form Factor semi-equipment down 4%. Sanmina, another contract manufacturer, down 5.8% after that earnings gap, but bounced off the 21-day moving average this week. Several decent bounces in many of the leaders, but several breakdowns also. CSIQ, definitely the strongest solar stock, and we talked about this massive wall of blue, new 52-week high on Friday. Still below its all-time highs, but 3 straight up weeks there, up 17.95%. Also, DQ, which is also a solar manufacturer, made a new 52-week high also interweek, basically trading at kind of a 3-week tight area here. ARGX, another biotech, making new highs. Amphenol, just riding the trend here, well above its 10-week moving average, below the 21-day moving average. So definitely some character changes this week and last week. Solar Edge with a spin out after a strong hammer on earnings. So mixed bag in solars, besides the last two we just talked about. Barrick Mining with a new 52-week high on earnings. This was one of the leading gold stock earnings breakouts. Notable here is the strong sales growth and strong earnings growth. Teradyne, a GROTECTION, Toddzilla, and TurboTection Holding held that gap as well as the 21-day moving average, but down 6.75% on the week. Another gold stock, KGC, looking strong. Excuse me. ONC B1 Medicine in the cancer treatment area. This is a new name on the list with a blue dot here. Very strong earnings and sales. ASM Lithography 10-week test. Amgen Biotech Group definitely showing strength this week with Amgen in this massive 59-week 25% base. Kicked out on earnings. Was not a particularly strong report, but definitely made progress. And we're seeing this in some of the large biotechs as well as pharmaceutical stocks. UTHR, another biomed stock, trading nicely above this 10-week moving average as it's breaking out on the upper edge of this consolidation. AMD with a positive week of 5.6% on Lisa Su's positive guidance. Again, we saw a gap up on that news, a fade back below the 21-day moving average, but a pretty solid day on Friday. Overall down, but defended that 21-day moving average. This is a Toddzilla holding, and Don took a position this week, a small position as well. Veritiv down 4.9%. This is one that I bought on this bounce off the 50-day moving average. I'm about break even on it, but I felt this was a pretty good test of that 50-day. So again, I've got a tight stop on it. This is in the data center and showing very solid and consistent growth. VSAT, little reversal, but closed positive on the week. This is an oil and gas name that was up 1.9% on the watch list. NVT down. MongoDB held pretty tight. Down 2%, but definitely reclaimed that 21-day moving average after this earnings gap. Been consolidating and looking to have some decent relative strength. CommScope up 0.78%. Cummins Engines down 2%. Valero, some new oil and gas names. I think this is the second week this has been on the list, up 3.5%. This is another oil and gas refiner, HF St. Clair, looking good as it made a new 52-week high on Friday. Teva Pharmaceuticals, again, just showing it because it's in the top 25. Earnings gap followed through this week, up another 6%. Marathon Petroleum flagging here, up 3.2%. Baker Hughes also building this flat base, 7 weeks long, up 1.8%, with not much on the earnings or sales front. Google down 0.8%, but added to the list as Berkshire Hathaway took a position, up 4.08%, and some very positive news on their AI offerings. They're definitely becoming the leader in AI. Illumina is a name that gapped on earnings. This is another stock in the medical research, genome sequencing, and really just trading kind of 3 weeks tight, down 1% this week. This is a name that just had a nice gap coming into a new stage 2 uptrend. Tower Semi with a nice earnings reaction this week, up 18%. And this company makes radio frequency, which is big into the robotics, as well as full self-driving sensors and so forth. Very strong earnings reaction. Carpenter Tech, a specialty metal manufacturer, has been on the list, up 0.76%. New Holdings had earnings down on the week, but tightening up in this pivot zone. I don't really like the character of this stock, but it does have decent numbers, and perhaps one of these days it'll break out of this massive consolidation, but just has no push power yet. Eli Lilly, another 10% gain on the week as it broke out of this year-long base and just moving right up the right side very nicely. Almond, not much to say, trading tight. Wayfair backed off after pretty strong earnings reaction. RTX just trading tight. Deutsche Bank, several of these larger banks attempted to break out of cup bases this week. XMTR, this is a new merchandise name on the list added last week. Held the pivot this week on the 21-day moving average. One thing notable here is just extremely strong earnings and good sales figures. So just a typical canceling type stock. Johnson Controls down a little bit. NMM Navios Maritime Partners. This is a vessel operator standing out as some of the value plays emerge. And this was up 8% on the week, breaking through a cup with handle base. So earnings in 2 days, Monday after the close, I believe. GE Aerospace trading tight. AstraZeneca in the pharmaceutical area broke out of this cup with handle formation, up 5%. Snowflake, notable about Snowflake was the bounce off the 50-day moving average, but still below the 8 and the 21-day. But it did have a nice bounce, not on any particular heavy volume, just had an air pocket where it gapped down, opened basically equal low within the first 10 minutes, and then just rallied pretty strongly. So definitely some institutional support there. ISRG, after earnings a few weeks back, down 1.87%. SPX backed off 4.7%. Fastly, too small to be on the list. Datadog, down 3.2%, but did hold that 8-day moving average after the earnings gap. So definitely an earnings standout so far. Cardinal Health, trading higher. JFrog consolidating. Cisco Systems with earnings on Friday, 9.7% on the week. Gapped open on Thursday on earnings and held that gap on Friday. Definitely seeing some strong data center networking equipment numbers there. Not much to say here, just a hold of the 10-week moving average. ALB, which has been on the list now for quite a few weeks, up 18%. Topzilla did try this on this breakout, bought it really nicely As it gapped open here, got it early, got some feedback, and it just stopped me out and then retook off again. Sometimes these stage two stocks, especially in the commodities and metals, they can be very tricky and difficult, but it's definitely looking good, and it's definitely in this REMX, which we talk about, this VanEck rare earth metals, which is flagging, broke that downtrend line on Thursday and Friday, and ALB is one of the components in this. The other components I'm not really familiar with. There a lot of foreign type rare earth plays, but ALB is definitely a standout. General Motors, definitely not a can slim stock, but doing well. Fix held the 10-week moving average after gapping up on earnings here. So again, we're going to want to see these 10-week moving average tests hold. If we start breaking those, and we start breaking the 50-day on the NASDAQ 100 and the S&P, we're just not in good shape. So XPEV, this is another name from China. Toddzilla took a position, got this early out of this breakout, slightly down on it, but closed in the pivot zone as pretty heavy volume here on this breakout. But it is a Chinese stock, and China was weak on Friday, as we can see with Alibaba breaking that that 50-day moving average. So definitely some pressure on Chinese stocks. Gold, miners, we talked about. VanEck Pharmaceuticals is an ETF that's been trading in this long base, 62 weeks, very similar to Eli Lilly's chart, but attempted to break through that 100 area, got rejected, but some strength in pharmaceuticals. CrowdStrike, basically 3-4 week tight. IBM, basically trading a 3-week tight and acting pretty good. EQT in the natural gas area, up 3%, and right at the top of this space and potential breakout candidate. SQM broke out this week as this was added to the watch list 3 weeks ago. Follow through up 11%, and earnings next week. ATEC, spinal stock. GMED, this is a medical products. This is another spine stock that gapped on earnings and traded. So we've really got a 2-week tight here, up 0.67%. Lemonade backed off after the earnings gap. BTSG in the medical outpatient area, just consolidating. Comstock Resources, this is another natural gas play. So these are, the natural gas stuff is something that's been on and off the list, but this had a pretty solid week here and some very strong earnings and sales growth coming up here, perhaps on some mergers, not sure there, but looks pretty decent. EXE, another natural gas and oil and gas exploration, building a cup base, climbing up the right side of that base, looking at the daily, just a big cup base here in the making. Expedia, follow through this week. Todd, not much to say there, and that is it for the watch list. All right. Again, we appreciate follows on X and our YouTube channel. We encourage you to go to the Revere Asset YouTube, where all our videos appear. Likes, subscribes, and follows are appreciated. My email is todd@revereasset.com. My Twitter handle is @ToddMichael70. If you'd like to become a client, our number is 855-REAL-WEALTH. Ask to speak with Dan Stewart. And thank you again for listening. We'll be here next week, and of course, presenting our daily videos every night, as Revere is the most transparent advisor on Wall Street, telling it like it is and giving you all our plays and all our returns. Thank you and have a great weekend.